Hi, I'm Jenny Muller, and I'd like to introduce you to a new series called Seasonal Wildlife of Lewisboro. We're going to take you through the seasons, and we're going to talk about some of the wildlife that can be found in and around your backyards. Some you may be used to seeing, and some you've never seen before. We're going to start with an insect called the Katydid. There are several different species of Katydid. Most people hear them late in the summer, early in the fall, and these guys sit up in the tops of the trees and they make that call, Katydid, Katydid. So everyone knows what they sound like, but might not know what they look like. So we're going to show you a couple of the different species that are calling right now. We've got some that are found mostly in the fields, but the true Katydid, now he's calling here, is found in the canopies of the trees. These guys are in the cricket family, and the grasshoppers and crickets are very similar, but the crickets have antennae that are 3 times the lengths of their bodies. Now these guys right now are in their mating rituals, and they're up in the trees. They're calling Katydid, Katydid. And they're breeding. They're going to be laying their eggs, and then after their mating ritual is over, their life cycle is over, and then their eggs will winter over, and they will then emerge in the spring as little nymphs, and they will grow throughout the late spring and summer, and then by late summer, early fall, these guys are ready to start their calling, and the generation starts over again. So a lot of people will hear these but don't know what's making that noise. And I myself, this sound always reminds me of being a kid, and perhaps that's the same for some of you guys too. Another species of Katydid that we have is called a conehead Katydid. And if you notice, his head is a funny little cone shape, kind of comes to a little point. These guys usually hang out in the fields, and they have a different call. It's more of a trill. And you can find these in the fields. You can find them in the tall grass and shrubs. And these are a real neat little critter. Now, the reason these guys are so green is because their diet consists of leaf matter. So they're filled with chlorophyll, and it helps them camouflage and really blend in to their surroundings. So that keeps them safe from predators. Another species that we have is called the angular Katydid, angular winged Katydid. And that's this little hoppy guy over here. Okay. And you can see these guys are real nice and green, and that's to keep these guys safe from predators. Now, the females have a long thing in the back here that's called an ovipositor, and she uses this to deposit her eggs along the bark of trees and leaf stems. And the males do not have that. So these are some of the species of Katydid that we have, but the true Katydid, the one that actually mimics its name in the sounds that it makes, is this guy over here. And we don't see these as often as we see these, because these guys are way up in the tops of the trees. And as the leaves start to fall, you might come across these guys as their life cycles are coming to an end, but it's just they're real neat little critters just to sit and watch. It's fun to try to find them. Go out in the evening. You can hear them start to call on a mild evening, and go out there with your headlamps and see if you can't find some of these guys. One of the most common little characters of late summer, early fall are these woolly bear caterpillars. And I'm sure all of you have come across these little guys walking across your lawns or your driveways. These are neat little things because not only are they very cute, but there's a little urban legend associated with these in that they could supposedly predict the winter weather. And kind of a wives' tale, but you never know. Maybe these guys do know something that we don't. But what happens is right now they're all in a frenzy because they're out looking for some nice green leaves and juicy morsels to take down. They need to take as much energy as they can in right now because they're going to winter over. And then in the spring, these guys are going to weave sort of a fuzzy little cocoon. And late spring, these guys come out as a Isabella moth. Isabella moths are sort of a bland moth, brownish yellow. And then what they do is they find a nice mate and they pair up and the whole cycle starts again. Lay their eggs, and then we start to see these guys late summer, early fall, because now they're big enough to start moving around and start that cycle all over again. Another neat caterpillar that we're seeing here, maybe not as common as the woolly bear, but it's these big guys. They have these bristles to keep themselves safe from predators. They're a good sized caterpillar. They're actually much larger than this little woolly bear. We can get this guy out and compare the two. And this guy turns into what's called the great leopard moth. And they're actually pretty cool. They're sort of a off-white with black spots, and they're pretty impressive. Now, one thing to keep in mind when you do come across a fuzzy caterpillar, and if you're not really sure what it is, it's best not to pick them up because some can actually be toxic. And even though they will not bite or sting you, what they will do is leave a tiny little scratch in your skin using these bristles, and it can cause quite a reaction and make some people very sick. So if you're not sure what it is, it's best just to observe. Another neat insect that we have this time of year in abundance is the praying mantis. Now, these are one of my favorite guys. We're seeing them right now because they're in their mating mode. They're also laying their egg masses. We've got two different species of mantis here. We've got the Asian mantis, and that's the brown little guy here. And then the green ones are from Europe. Now, both these guys have been introduced about 80 to 100 years ago. We do not have in our area an indigenous mantis. These guys are real neat. They're the only insect that can swivel their heads 180 degrees. So they have sort of a human-like quality in that they can turn their head and look at you, and it almost looks as though they're listening to everything you have to say. These guys are great hunters, and they get their name by the way they hold their forelegs here as though they're in prayer, okay? And they'll sort of sit in one little spot, whether it's on a branch or in a field, and they'll wait for a little insect to come walking by. Then they'll pounce on it, and their legs are barbed. They've got these little, looks like thorns on the insides of their legs here, and that's to hold their prey. Now, these guys they have a real touchy mating ritual. The males will copulate with her, and if he's lucky, he gets to walk away with his life. But many times the females end up eating the male, which can make for a really bad first date. Now, I have an egg mass here that one of these guys had deposited, and it kind of looks like a foamy caulk or something like that. But inside this protective foam are hundreds of eggs, and these are encased in this protection because they'll actually sit out in the winter and go through storms and cold wind, and then come the warm spring, hundreds of these little guys are going to come out, and they're highly cannibalistic, so they disperse quickly so they don't eat each other. So these are real neat creatures, and if you go out and find one of these, they're very beneficial. They'll eat the critters you don't really want around your house. Of course, they don't really discern, so they could also eat the good ones too. Late summer, early fall is when the migration of the monarch butterfly starts. This butterfly is known for its migration in large numbers. One of the things that makes the monarch so special is that they are toxic to the animals that would normally want to eat them. And the reason that is they feed on the milkweed plant. And the milkweed is a toxic plant, and the name comes from the milk that is inside. Well, it's not really milk, but it's actually a toxic sap. And this one isn't really oozing. And that's really because these guys are starting to dry out. This is a late blooming plant. Usually you don't see these so green this late in the season. They're starting to look like this. But what happens is, as the monarch is in its caterpillar form, they're chewing all these leaves up, and then they're pretty much protected from being eaten by birds and other animals. Now there's another butterfly that mimics the monarch called a Viceroy, and it looks very similar, only it's smaller and it's got these white dots along the outer wings are a little more pronounced on the Viceroy, and some of these black bars are a little thicker. So the Viceroy is not toxic at all, but he benefits from this guy being toxic. So he's mimicking the monarch, and he gets away with that protection, which is a neat little trick. There's a lot of movement going on now with some of the reptiles and amphibians. This is an American toad, and this little fellow is having some last meals before he heads to the wetlands, and he's going to spend the winter buried under the mud in hibernation. Now, the neat thing about toads and frogs being one and the same, toads are a frog, really, that doesn't require water to live in, and these are found more in the woods or sandy soil in and around our yards. Toads have a neat defense system. They have two things that they do, one of which is to blow themselves up like a balloon. So if they feel threatened, they poof up, like he's doing here. And the other thing they do is they secrete a mild toxin from their skin. So If your dog or cat goes out and tries to eat one of these, they can get pretty sick. It can actually cause seizures. Also, if you come across a toad, you always want to wash your hands if you handle them, because this can make people a little queasy as well. Now, when these toads find an insect, they go by movement. They'll see something crawling along. Their tongues are very sticky on the end. The tongue's going to come out, bring the insect into their mouths, and they don't swallow like we do. They don't have muscles in their throat to put the food down. Instead, they blink their eyes, and the eyes actually push the food down their throats. So these are real neat critters, and very beneficial to have around the house. Now, we've had a resident black rat snake under this board for the past few months. And in a few weeks, he's going to be looking to go towards his hibernation quarters where he'll spend the winter. But this is a black rat snake. We've got two black snakes that we have in our area, the black rat snake and the black racer. Two different species, but they look very similar. The black rat snake is a constrictor. So the rat snake, how they go about their prey is they like to hang around barns and homes where we could have rodents. They're wonderful rodent control. Rather than putting out poison, this is the best way to go. They constrict their prey by squeezing it. So each time that animal exhales, they squeeze a little harder. And once the animal succumbs, they swallow it down. The easiest way to tell the difference between a black rat snake and a racer is the scales. These guys have a keeled scale, which means there's a line that runs through the middle of each scale, giving it more of a textured appearance. The black racer has a smooth scale, so there's no line. So they're very glossy, very shiny looking. The racer also, as the name implies, are very fast. Racers are more of a snake eater, and they overpower their prey rather than constrict it. The black rat snake, this is a young one. They can get to be about, at the most, 8 feet long. So they are our largest, longest snake. And they're very impressive, and they're quite friendly, and a wonderful benefit to have around the house. Now, we've had a couple of real neat snakes in our wood pile all summer. One of which is a snake that is not very common, and that's called the Hognose Snake. Now, the Hognose Snake is named for his little upturned nose. So he's got this little shovel nose, and the reason he has that is so that he can dig up his favorite food, which is the toad. Now, hognose snakes are real neat in that, you can hear them hissing there, they are little bluffers. So if you come across one of these, he will most likely put up a huge fuss. He's gonna start hissing, he's gonna spread his neck, which will make him look very similar to a cobra. He's gonna do everything he can to scare you off. And if that doesn't work, he's going to vomit and flip over on his back, and he'll play dead. So he'll play possum, thinking that you don't wanna mess with the dead snake, and he's hoping you're gonna walk away. Now, these are rear-fanged in that they have fangs in the top of their mouths towards the back of their mouth. And the reason they have these fangs is that when the toad is grabbed by the hognose, it's going to inflate itself, like the balloon that we talked about. These fangs puncture that toad, lets the air out, and then he can swallow him down. These are not as common as they were, which is very sad. All snakes are protected You know, they're a wonderful thing to be able to say you've got them in your yard and around the house. Legally, not able to have any native species as a pet. So I'm happy to know that I've got some of these neat animals around my yard, and I hope that you can find some as well. Now, I'm sure all of you are familiar with white-tailed deer. Everyone's got those in their backyard. Now, this time of year, with the fall, we have the bucks are going into what's called the rut. They're out looking for their girlfriends. And after the mating season, the bucks will drop their antlers, which is a real neat find. If you go hiking in the woods late winter, you're going to find these lying along the leaf litter. Now, a lot of the rodents that we have will come upon these things, and they're going to chew on them, and they're going to get all kinds of minerals and calcium from these. So it's a real neat treat for them, but they're real fun to find too. Now, some people call these horns, but a horn is different than an antler. I have two skulls here. I have one from a buck and one from a goat. Now, you can see on the buck skull that you've got these two little pedestals here. This fellow had lost his antlers, okay, before he passed on. So the antlers would sit like this, oopsie, okay, and these shed off. Now, in the spring and summer, these start to grow again. They come out again every year. This is a cyclical thing. Summer, they're velvety, they're forming inside, and once that velvet's rubbed off, you've got this nice, hard, bony antler. Now, with a horn, they have a casing over the horn, but that starts to grow from birth. And if you look under this, you can see it's part of the skull. So they never ever drop their horns. So that's a real neat thing. You've got these two different, they look the same, but they're completely different. So if you're out walking in the woods, come around January, keep a lookout for some antlers. I hope you enjoyed our first show, Seasonal Wildlife of Lewisboro, and I hope you have a better understanding of some of the creatures that you may find in and around your backyard. Join us next spring for another episode of Seasonal Wildlife in Lewisboro. I'm Jenny Muller. Thanks for joining us.
You're watching Lewisboro Community Television, Channel 20.